Der häufigste Fehler, den Kryptoinvestoren machen, ist, dass sie viel zu spät investieren. Als Beispiel, wie Bitcoin bei 20.000 Dollar war, wollte niemand in Bitcoin investieren. Die Leute haben gesagt, Bitcoin ist wieder ein Scam und dass er niemals seinen Allzeithöchstwert erreichen wird. Jetzt, wo Bitcoin fast auf 100.000 ist, sagen die Leute, es ist digitales Gold. BlackRock ist investiert, der ETF ist draußen und Bitcoin wird wahrscheinlich zu 1 Million gehen. Und genau dasselbe mit Solana. Vor nicht mal 2 Jahren war Solana noch bei 20 Dollar. Niemand wollte Solana anrühren und die Leute haben gesagt, Solana hat keinen Use Case. Jetzt, wo Solana 10x gemacht hat, wieder fast auf seinem All-Time Highs, wollen die Leute investieren und sagen, eigentlich war es eh klar. Also du siehst, es ist immer dasselbe Muster. Die meisten warten auf zu viel Bestätigung, um einen Coin zu kaufen. Und wenn sie es dann machen, ist der Coin meistens im Preis schon überhitzt und natürlich ist das Risiko dann viel höher. Das heißt, deine wichtigste Aufgabe ist es, Coins frühzeitig zu finden oder eine These aufzustellen, warum gewisse Coins wie zum Beispiel Bitcoin bei 20.000 oder Solana bei 20 Dollar jetzt nicht richtig eingepreist sind. Und genau aus diesem Grund sprechen wir heute über eine Chain, die noch nicht gelauncht ist, nämlich BeraChain. BeraChain ist wohl eines der gehyptesten Projekte in Krypto momentan und es soll wahrscheinlich dieses Jahr noch launchen. Aber ich spreche heute nicht alleine über dieses Projekt, sondern ich habe Jani eingeladen. Er ist Founder von HoneyJar. Zusammen besprechen wir, ob BeraChain der nächste Solana-Killer ist, wie wichtig Kultur im Kryptospace ist, wie man sich jetzt noch positionieren kann, bevor es startet und auch seine persönliche Geschichte, wie er es geschafft hat, in einem Jahr von 0 auf 50.000 Follower zu kommen, obwohl er nur über BeraChain postet und wie er persönlich tausende Bitcoins verloren hat. Ich wurde nicht angeschrieben oder bin gesponsert von BeraChain. Ich mache dieses Gespräch aus eigenem Interesse und auch, weil ich euch zeigen möchte, wie interessant es ist, tiefe Einblicke in ein Ökosystem zu bekommen und mit jemandem zu reden, der den größten Inkubator gebaut hat auf einer Chain. Das Gespräch ist auf Englisch, aber ihr könnt auf YouTube einfach deutsche Untertitel aktivieren. Viel Spaß. We're live. Hello and welcome, Jani. Thank you so much for your time. The first question that's on my mind is the layer one killer narrative. I've seen you recently post about this, that people in the crypto space, they always search for the next layer one killer. For Bitcoin, it was Ethereum. For Ethereum, it's Solana, and now we have Sui against Solana and all that kind of stuff. And now I've seen people talking about BeraChain being the next Solana killer. So I just wanted your quick thoughts or take about this whole narrative. And does it even make sense to call BeraChain Solana killer?
Yeah, the other day, Jani put up a post about this, and it was referencing a article by Kobe, Cobie, on Twitter, who's been around the crypto scene for quite some time, early Bitcoin OG and very well regarded. Has an article on, I forget, Substack, Medium, I'm not sure, called Trading the Metagame. And the analogy that Kobe used is essentially there are patterns which repeat in markets, and that you can learn a lot from, say, massive multiplayer online role-playing games, where there's certain tactics depending on the layup, and that trading can be much more akin to thinking about it in this type of way. And so one of the narratives, as you've mentioned, that comes up in repetition each kind of cycle is the L1 killer type of narrative. And why this is important is fundamentally humans, the oldest technology that we have is storytelling. And for folks who are recently arriving through to older folks, this is a story which has come up time and again. As you say, for Bitcoin, it was Ethereum. For Ethereum, blah, blah, blah. What we can say certainly about this killer narrative is if their job is to be assassins, then they're bad assassins. But that's kind of not the point. The point is that this is a simple story that is fairly easy for people to get their head around. And there is some element of truth to that type of pattern, in the sense that within crypto, there is often rotations from older things to the shiny new thing. Last cycle, Solana was a bit more of the shiny new thing. And if we ignore some of the funny business that was happening behind the scenes, before that, it was Ethereum with the ICOs and this type of thing. So as a simple narrative, does it make sense? With the logical brain, not quite. but with the more creative kind of storytelling, kind of humans are creatures of narrative stories and this type of thing. So if we're trading the meta game, in that sense, yes, it does make sense. The other part is essentially when people are arriving to maybe, let's come at this from the perspective of someone who's recently arriving to crypto. If you don't understand the language and some of the terms are difficult to interpret, and if maybe finance or the technology is fairly new to you, or it's kind of foreign, there is certain things that you can still interpret from humans on the internet. So it's kind of easy for people to resonate with, are those people over there having fun together or not? Like, is there lots of art being generated, music, cultural events? Are they hanging out? What does it feel like? And I think in this sense, it certainly does make sense to put BeraChain up there in terms of the killer L1 narrative, not necessarily because it's trying on the technical level to compete, because it's playing a different game on the technical level, but certainly in terms of having a mature culture that is very, let's say, robust by this point. It's a contender for a shiny new thing, which has, let's say, a gravity to it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. And you just touched on culture right now, and nobody can talk about BeraChain without mentioning culture. I know you talk about it quite frequently as well, but everyone I know in the community has a strong sense of belonging. And my question to you is, even though BeraChain is not live yet on mainnet, it has its own language style, some words like hello or oga boga. And how important do you think is culture in crypto in general? Because this cycle, we've seen meme coins popping up like crazy, and it has become more and more obvious that like how important culture is even before utility. So how important do you think is this whole topic in crypto, and where does BeraChain stand with culture, and what are the plans here as well to keep this positive momentum and inner circle like strong?
So culture itself is utility in the sense that culture is a human technology set of processes for assisting someone who's outside of that culture to onboard into it through either some set of rituals, practices, shared conventions, and this type of thing. This goes way back in terms of evolutionary psychology. And so the utility aspect, and I think this more broadly speaking to people's connection to internet communities and this type of thing, is, and I'm borrowing here from some of the narrative from Mustap Murad. He's much more eloquent than Jani, so I'll point your listeners to Murad's
I already did.
Token 202049. So let's have that as the base plate, as he's pretty much, it's pitch perfect. There wasn't a word misplaced there. So culture is what Jani uses instead of cult. So Murad talks about cults moving through to movements. Jani uses the etymological root of cult. It comes from the root word cultus, which actually, if you drill down backwards beneath the contemporary use of kind of cults in its contemporary sense, means to cultivate and culture. And so the importance, I think, of these things in any sphere in the web scene is essentially culture is the process by which you can convert people into a set of conventions and way of thinking. Essentially, it's a way of onboarding people into some set of shared stories. Now, why is this type of thing important? It really depends on the persona of the person. But I think if you look at any of the dominant ecosystems in crypto, there's something there beyond just the technology itself. The ways in which people have a sense of alignment and sense of belonging in, say, Bitcoin or Ethereum or Solana, is fundamentally the social battery, the people battery, the store of energy or value that allows that, let's say, culture to exist through various market cycles. So if we look at Bitcoin as the OG, Jani, to share some of my personal lore, I've been around in the crypto sphere since 2012. I've been full-time crypto since the end of 2013. So I've been here for many different cycles and many different eras of, let's say, predominant cultures, which were the, let's say, loudest at the time. And so in terms of what's important about this for not just BeraChain, but any of these scenes is essentially, I think about it in terms of almost like a country. A country is in decline, and this is something that Wie Jani speaks about from Primitive Ventures, is if a country's population, the average age is increasing, generally speaking, that's a country on the way to decline. Mm-hmm. And I think the same can be said for kind of chain economies. And the thing which kind of pulls people in and creates, keeps it vibrant and keeps it kind of sustainable is essentially culture. And I think culture is a function of a few different things, which we can go into, such as TTD, things to do, time to first response, and this type of thing. But
I have a couple of questions now regarding this.
Sure,
so as you said, because you were so early in the game, and I know some people have been as well, how was the process for you of, because culture can also have its downsides, right? Or maybe you have a bit different opinion on this, but there are a lot of maximalists who never get out of their way of thinking. So can culture be bad in some way as well if you are not open to new things? And how were you able to open up to a new thing and maybe also go all into it? Because I know you're very deep into the ecosystem and in the trenches. So how was this process for you? And maybe also an advice for other people who are maybe maximalists of some sort.
So I don't think I agree. I think culture is a dynamic, changing thing that can expand and contract as needed, and it can fold in difference. So what I mean by this is, for example, in BeraChain, you can have a bearer who's a MAGA person and a bearer who's a Democrat. You can have a bearer who's a Zionist and a bearer who's a pro-Palestinian person. Underneath the umbrella of bearer, like there's space for everyone in a particular type of sense, because as a system, as a base plate, let's say at a technological level, it's a canvas for infinite economic creativity. And infinite economic creativity is not bound to any one identity set. So in terms of maximalist, what that makes me think of is kind of the inner perception of a person in terms of their identity. And so that's a really distinct and different thing from a dynamic culture. So I think maybe that's more akin to maybe cult. I think more cult has these kind of very strong in-group, out-group dynamics. Oftentimes there are figureheads with quite extreme beliefs. And oftentimes there is some quite high, let's say, consequence for deviating from what is quite a narrow band of what's permissible. So that's quite different. That's like an ossification, whereas culture is much more like water. It's much more in terms of its adaptability. It's a set of, and certainly within cults, you can have a culture where the rules are about ossification and solidification. But I see that as much different than an expansive culture that's dynamic. In terms of your question, for Jani personally, look, I've gone through so many experiences in crypto. I don't know if I've shared this. I've lost thousands of Bitcoin. I've lost the hard drive that had the private keys to my Ethereum ICO ETH. Like I've
Oh
had
God.
hundreds of millions of dollars, probably more by this point, just burnt to the ground, lost like the Joker film. Not on purpose, it just went that way. Um, I've had these experiences, and so I don't want to make myself sound like I've ascended to some other spiritual plane, because
Mhm.
when you make mistakes of that level, you just need to kind of find whatever way that you can of dealing with it.
Mhm.
Um, so during those earlier cycles where I could have made, very vast sums of money, and who knows what would have happened, it required that I decided to stay in the game. So I could have made it after the first couple of cycles that I was around, and I fucked it up.
Mhm.
But in this process of sticking around, Jani's practice has always just been about each time I enter into a new ecosystem, the first thing I do is start a new Twitter account, and I do not in any way commingle with my past identities. And my way of putting, and this is what I did with Bera, for example. So I've been full-time BeraChain since the end of 2021, once the
Mhm.
market started crapping out. I could see the writing on the wall, and I've part of my practice is during the bear markets, find somewhere to build. That's a vibrant, interesting place to be. And so part of that strategy is to create a totally fresh Twitter account, and then see which ecosystem is the funnest to be in. Because if I'm going to be there all bear market, you want to have fun, right? Because there's no guarantee when you're a builder that you will find PMF, that you'll find people who want to use what you're building. And so at the very least, it's a kind of emotional arbitrage of, look, if I spend the next 2 years building something and no one uses it, at least I'll have fun along the way. Um, and certainly it's less painful than sticking around and watching the charts chop every day and not doing anything. That I've done that before, and it did not suit my psychology. And I'm not someone who can really easily just completely leave the markets for 3 years and then come back.
Mhm.
This so did I answer your question? Jenny's a bit
Y-
of a
Yeah, no, of course, and I there are so many new questions that popped up, and a question that I also wrote down for me to ask you. But first of all, congratulations for sticking to it, and after everything that went down, that you're still around, still building, which is very cool. But I also had a question for you about building a community, building a niche. Your account on X, you're one of the greatest yappers in the BeraChain ecosystem, and so my question was, if you have done this before and what's your background in copywriting? But now, as you said, you've done that plenty of times. Are your other accounts, your other personalities online? Are they somewhere, or do you don't talk
yeah, yeah.
about like,
Yeah, I've how do I talk about this? When I haven't spoken about this before. This is weird. So there's identities which are done. I spend time. Look, I'll be honest with you. Um, it was around 2013, 2014. I got robbed at gunpoint.
mm-hmm,
And this was during an in-person crypto for cash exchange.
mm-hmm,
So that was at gunpoint, and then I've also been robbed at knife point before. And
mm-hmm,
so that gave me a really visceral, and it was for large amounts of money back then.
mm-hmm,
And I think those were like the Wild West days. It was really a different time, let's put it
yeah,
that way. There weren't so many mechanisms and easy ways to enter, exit crypto in a sense. So you were always kind of coming up into, let's say, the reality of, let's say, the people who were really using those technologies at that time.
mm-hmm,
And that gave Jani a really visceral, like, experience of how it can go wrong. And
mm-hmm,
so each time I move through into a different ecosystem, one of the reasons that I just do it in a way where I don't commingle, so I don't pull in my past identities into the new one, is part of that is just honestly upsec. And
mm-hmm,
so once an identity is not needed anymore, I'll go to the Internet Archive. I will go to website hosts. I'll go to anyone that's hosted material. of anything that I've put out before, and I ask them to take it down.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been doing this for many, many years now. So there's many different layers. This is probably maybe the fourth or fifth time, depending on when you start counting, that Jani has built something that has kind of escaped, like reached a escape threshold. And so there are a set of practices that I follow where it's fairly it's like a general formula that I follow. And I'm happy to share it. It's not like some secret magic or anything. A lot of it is just to do with communicating openly and finding a place where people want to connect. That's fun. That's at root the fundamental foundation of building a new identity and a new ecosystem. I think a lot of this is informed by the fact that I'm quite old. I've been around on the internet. Like I used to hang out in IRC rooms, BBS boards, like weird places on the internet, participating in community a lot. And there was just some general observations about how humans with niche interests connect with each other. I've found to be pretty cross-transferable over time in different contexts. And generally at base, it's just that find people that you resonate with, where there's some shared humor, who like to communicate with each other. It's just now that we've got a whole other set of cybernetic, cryptographically enabled tools. So now we've got layers of value. It's not just communication, it's also the ability to transfer value to each other. And not just that, we've now got the ability to write software that can do things. When you have all of those things together, it really supercharges a lot of what we used to do as geeks on the internet.
Yeah, that's true. But would you still say as a skill over the years of building identities that you gotten better at it? Like, I mean, is it
Yeah.
just for you? Was it, yeah, because it was just finding the right community, finding the right niche, finding the right language for you to express yourself more openly? Or would you also say you just gotten like better at it, better at just copywriting, better at
So
describing your
one
message?
one one rule is don't get people to come to you. Go to where there are people. That's the first one. That's make your life easier. So part of once you've created let's say you create 6 new identities on Twitter, and you're speaking in quite different zones, and you can treat it almost like a data analyst. So my background is in data analytics. Which account is the one which is growing the fastest just by talking about what you're interested about in that zone? All the way back in 2021, hands down, without even any competition, it was already the Bears in terms of, let's put it this way. I created a 0 follower, 0 following account. I didn't even have a PFP. And within 3 weeks of just speaking in the Bera community, the founder of BeraChain was already talking to this low follower account because I was doing some silly stuff and people were finding it funny. That's quite remarkable if you think about it in terms of one of the main things I think when you're building is you want to the main scarce resource is time when all is said and done. And you want to know that the time that you pour into something, fundamentally you're going to get a return on that time. You want to de-risk and risk adjust getting time rugged fundamentally if we boil it down that way. And so just trial and error A/B testing, which is the ecosystem where people are having fun together, where the developers are available, where the founders are involved at the community level. BeraChain really ticked all of those boxes, and not because it wasn't a from above directive; it was an emergent property. And no one knew who I was. Like they didn't know yet that Jani would become Jani. I will say, I don't like to add the caveat. I had spent a lot of money on these Bear NFTs, so there was also that signal of whoever this person is. They've just spent a lot of money on these weird bear JPEGs, and so there's that incentive for people to engage with this account. Who are they? What's going on? Why did they do this? What's their plan? But even with that being the case, it's not every ecosystem where someone can, say, spend a whole bunch of money on something and then have a community of people engage with them. Like that isn't a foregone conclusion.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you summed it up pretty well. I think it's just finding the right community, and but I think still probably for you it was a combination of things, but also spending money in NFT communities help and brings your status up, and then you can reach more people. It's a full circle, but still it's like very impressive what you managed to achieve in 1 year, and it's a good reminder
Just
also
to clarify, I've been focused on BeraChain full-time since 2021. 2022 was a lot of like open research, let's call it theory crafting. So building narratives, let's say A/B testing. For example, that was when I developed the way of cult as a service, cult market fit, the triangle of autism, all of these different, the fat bearer thesis, for example, all of the, let's say, simple stories that by that point there was about 1,000 people, let's say 500 of which were daily active users on Twitter talking all the time. And so you could experiment with narratives that seemed to catch on. And so that was 2022. And then at the end of 2022, early 2023, that's when I launched the HoneyJar. So whilst the HoneyJar was launched in January of 2023, it was built on the top of a year of building, let's say, social capital, and just being active, a daily active user. And really, I should say also another side effect of spending money on the NFTs is within a month of that, the BeraChain, Smokey, and the other founders of what has become BeraChain, but at the time was Bongbear's NFT, invited me to write a seed check in the Series A of BeraChain. So there's like, so I saw an early version of what became the technical docs on the website. And because I've been around for so long, I was seeing early preprints of the Ethereum white paper, Polkadot, Cosmos, all of this stuff, like in the time before Ethereum had launched, during the time there was really only Bitcoin and let's say Bitcoin derivatives or tweaks. And so when I saw the BeraChain bamboo paper, what has become the docs, and I understood who the team was and their background, and also who the funders were and what their backgrounds were. And remember at the time, like, let's put it this way, when FTX exploded, not a single BeraChain investor kind of in any way got touched by that at all. So it was an entirely different segment of, let's say, the crypto economy, who I had a lot of respect for. So when I saw the energy and the people congregating around this team, and I saw that BeraChain was the first time that I saw a genuinely different kind of economic experiment on top of the blockchain tech. It really, and given where the market was at, we were entering into a bear market. It felt pretty risk adjusted to me to just 100% focus my attention on this thing. And then the last caveat is, do you know the rebasing bears?
Of course, I own some.
Yeah, and so I think they were really smart in the sense that each of those rebases, for those who don't know quite how they work, is essentially if you hold one of the previous generations of bear, then you have a right to, for each one that you hold of, let's say, the previous generation, you get 2 of the next generation. You just need to claim them. And this is part of the function of the value of a community, is because you had let's say, an intrinsic value for these bears, because there was, let's say, 2,000 people by that point around, that gave these bears some floor value. And so really during the bear market, for people who were involved kind of early in the bears, it kind of kept their portfolios afloat, right? And so I was, when a lot of people were kind of under the water, I was heading into 2023, to be honest, really up. And so a lot of the money that I spent creating the HoneyJar, to be honest, came from the rebasing bears. And so you can kind of think of the way that, I don't know if they set out to do it this way, but the function, or at least the impact of the rebasing bear collection, instead of it being dropped like a 10K collection dropped all at once, by having 7 different generations and it being around 9,000, it injected capital into the community over time. And it has kind of functioned like sweat equity in a type of a way, but liquid way before seed investors in BeraChain has been. And so I think 1.5 million that's been spent on THJ, the vast majority of it came from bear JPEGs of bears smoking weed. So there's been like, it's not a simple story, you know what I mean? It's like when you see other layer ones looking over at BeraChain and being like, how can we copy this or how can we copy that? It's actually multi-layered. Like it's really quite, and I'm not sure it was ever here's the plan A, B, C, D. It's more this non-linear, rhizomatic kind of emergent chaos and confluence of different things working out.
How do you see like this chaos for new people to onboard new people? Because as you said, like in comparison to other layer ones where it's maybe a little bit more on paper what they are planning to do, how they want to do it, and it seems like in Bera it was like a process of finding out what is wanted, what is needed, and how easy do you think is it though to onboard complete newbies into this sort of ecosystem?
So I'll let the data here speak for itself. So we run the largest data studio on June. Like if you go to the leaderboard, we're the top by quite a lot. And if it can be tracked on chain, we track it. We also have a whole bunch of social listening stuff with Meltwater. We use Kaito quite extensively now as well. And so I'd say it depends how you want to define onboarding. If you look at the raw numbers on chain, the number of unique addresses which have spent money on something in the BeraChain ecosystem is up and to the right. So we're approaching, I think, 80,000 unique wallets. Now, let's be conservative. Let's say that for every one person, they're running 10 wallets, right? Let's be super conservative. That's still 8,000 unique people around the globe. It's quite spread. If you look at the geographic data, there's quite an even spread between Europe, the States, places like Vietnam, Korea, China, like the rest of the APAC and Australasian region, the African continent. So we can see that there's usage, even if we sandbag it. So one way of analyzing this stuff, we mentioned Murad, is in one of the data dashboards that we've got, is I was interested to know for an NFT or a token, as the price changes over time, at each of those different price points, how many users, how many unique holders did they have? And I've been doing a bunch of blind A/B tweets, and I've been sharing an NFT from Murad's list, and I've been sharing an NFT from the Bera Eco, and I've been asking which one is the Murad NFT and which one is the Bera NFT. And it quite often surprises people because in each instance, people are saying, okay, the narrative goes, Murad has a very large following, was the main character for a little bit, although maybe now it's the bonk person, who knows. And the assumption is when you're a main character, you drive a lot of unique users and basically the number goes up and to the right. In almost every instance, the charts which people thought were Murad NFTs were actually Bera NFTs. So there's now, as I mentioned, 80,000 unique wallets, but even if we sandbag it down to 8,000, you actually only at the core to really like set off this kind of reflexive kind of market response in the charts.
Mm-hmm.
You 8,000 is a lot of unique holders. In terms of onboarding new users, we're actually, in terms of top of funnel, we're meeting a lot of people. And actually, their first experience, full stop, with crypto has been a Cup Quest, which is,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't know what a Cup Quest is, it's a questing platform that THJ have developed over the last year so that we didn't need to use Galaxy. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're getting
Interesting.
other responses of people ringing up people, and this has been something that Jani's also observed. Um, People who are normies, they're not crypto people at all, and they're of their own, let's say, motivation, asking what is this BeraChain thing. So if you consider that BeraChain hasn't launched yet, everything has been pre-game. There's something between, let's say, 8,000 unique wallets and 80,000 people. So let's say
Mm-hmm.
somewhere around the 10,000 upwards mark. If you consider that a lot of the NFTs that people are purchasing are attached to one of hundreds of projects which have decided to wait to build in BeraChain. So whereas all of the experimental DeFi on Ethereum gone, it's gone to BeraChain.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the takeaway from stuff like Korea Blockchain Week, from DevCon, which has just happened, from Token, is teams, once they arrive to BeraChain, have decided to wait for BeraChain to launch rather than go to a different chain.
Yeah, I've
And
seen at
there's
all these
hundreds.
conferences. I've seen at all these conferences the lines where people are just waiting to get into the Bera talks and all that stuff. It's crazy actually.
So a function of a vibrant culture is when, and you see it time and again. Once you see these patterns, it's really difficult to unsee it. There are growth and, let's say, acceleration hacking that you can do, right, at an algorithmic level, to launch and have it be all over the timeline, all over traditional media, for a very short span of time. But it's very difficult to persist that over time in a consistent type of way.
Mm-hmm.
Unless there's some type of baseline foundational set culture, um, those types of, let's say, manipulated, because it's manipulation of a certain sort, launches end up dying down to their true state. So here I'm talking about like the VC level, and by
Mm-hmm.
VC level I mean like verus cultus, like the true culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then it really, that's when you see the reality. And so if you look at things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, like Solana post FTX, they had the most brutal journey, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a true culture there. And fundamentally, that can't be faked. It can't be manipulated, and it is a function of time. And I think what BeraChain's done, and I don't think they're geniuses, I just think it's a chaotic emergent property of what's happened, is that BeraChain's launching into quite a unique condition, and that's they're launching into a mature culture. I think once you've got a diehard set of people, which is somewhere between, let's say, 10,000 and 50,000 people, you're then in a established culture, because fundamentally, with all of the, let's say, liquidity events that are coming, so the way that BeraChain Foundation has approached it is they've innovated from the way that Layer Zero did it, which was essentially Layer Zero as a foundation. When they were doing their airdrop,
Mm-hmm.
they put out a request to any projects who had integrated or used Layer Zero, and asked them to essentially tell them how they would distribute some of their allocation of airdrop to their users. And then they applied some Sybil filtering. So BeraChain's done that, but not just with technical orgs. They've also acknowledged that a big part of BeraChain's success has been on the cultural side. So we've got things like ecosystem navigators, let's say, like a kind of an interactive map, such as BeraLand. There's media studios such as the Honeycast. There's whole music production um, studios like Baby Bearer. It's one of the best sounding ecosystems out there. I could go on and on here, but the approach that they've taken is, I think, quite humble and smart because ultimately they understand that, as I mentioned, there's 100 to 200 projects launching, which will be ready to launch pretty soon after BeraChain launches, many of them on testnet. And they're the people the projects are the ones speaking to their users every day. And so they know the best, at least this is how the foundation have said, you guys understand your users the best, you're closest to them. So you tell us how to reward them. And so when a mature culture gets the level of liquidity events that kind of are coming down the pipeline, I think there's a general understanding that the returns from this kind of shallow engagement, airdrop hunting is a diminishing game because it's increasingly difficult to differentiate yourself from Sybil farmers and robots. And so really edge starts coming again from engaging deeply with legitimate, deeper things to do. And I think if you want to measure the maturity of an ecosystem, of an economy and a culture as the complexity of connections and the complexity of things to do, if you were to draw a circle with 200 dots and you were to connect many of them, you start getting really quite a complex map. And that's not coming in a year. That's coming within months of BeraChain launching. And so I actually, it's Jani's kind of fairly strong conviction. I don't even think it's now too weird. I don't think I'm delusional with this, that BeraChain's reached escape velocity in terms of a mature L1. It's one of the L1s that's now going to be around for a long time.
For me, it's a classic case of things that were obvious in hindsight. People in crypto, or not just in crypto, in investing in general, they tend to only make decisions when they're obvious in hindsight. Like Bitcoin, when it was at 20K, it was undervalued in my opinion, or Solana even at $20. If you looked at what was happening on chain, if there was still activity from the developer side, was what Solana was building, it was still a solid tech. It was mispriced in my opinion. And now where Solana is like back at $250, and now the narrative is here from meme coins, now it's like everyone is like, yeah, it's obvious in hindsight, it will go probably even higher because it's just a meme chain now. And I think for me personally, everything that I looked at BeraChain, from culture, community, tech, and everything that you said, for me, it will not be a surprise if it will reach like very successful levels, because for me, it's obvious. But people tend to only dive deep into topics like that when the mindshare is like already too big. So I think personally, it will be a classical case of yeah, because right now I have the feeling BeraChain is on a lot of people's maps, but it still hasn't reached this huge mind share that it will at some point. And then people will say, yeah, obviously. But yeah, okay, but why didn't you like double down on it if you already like saw what they're building for the last couple of years or months?
I think, look, can I give financial advice?
Of
We're in a
course.
different US regulatory environment, so I'm not going to go to the gulag straight away, maybe 4 years.
Yeah.
The way that Jani does this is, for some reason, you go through some type of a psychological transformation when you've spent money on something. And what I think this is maybe common knowledge among some people, is the amount doesn't matter. Like, it can be €1, $1, or it could be 100. It kind of doesn't matter. Like, once you've spent, and this maybe gives some insight into, at THJ, we all always make sure there's something you can spend $1 on. Always. There's always something. And part of it is this psychological hack that if you spent €1 on something, for some reason, the brain then chews on it and goes, did I just burn that dollar? Like, what is that? What's going on? And I think a really big, let's say, power tool in any investor's toolbox is curiosity. And so anything that can shift you to update whatever your prior judgments, prejudgments, prejudice, caution, resistance, that's, to be honest, how Jani always approaches stuff. I would say that once you've spent $1 on something in the Bera Eco, then set a timer. Give yourself, okay, you're going to give yourself 48 hours to really try and find the edge of this thing. Like, is it truly as busy as it says it is? Like, there are some ecosystems, if you spend a full 48 hours consuming it, you actually pretty much know most of what's going on in that eco. That won't happen with BeraChain. And I think anytime that you find a zone where you can't find the edges easily, that is essentially what you're dealing there with is an economy. And anytime you're dealing with economies generate value. And then it becomes a question of time, like how early am I into this thing or not? And really we're right over, like we're pre-chain. It's like arriving to Ethereum pre-ICO, or it's like the ICO's happened, but the network hasn't launched. We're so fucking early. And I think that's the thing that will kill a lot of people who were aware of this and maybe heard people like Jani saying this type of thing, but didn't have the mental toolbox to shift gears for whatever reason. And I think when you are, there are different, evolutionary speaking, like when you're out hunting, you need to scan the horizon. If you're around the fire, you need to look if there's a tiger at the edge. All of those are really good skills for kind of identifying danger or opportunity. But once I think a lot of folks in the crypto scene, like we're learning a whole bunch of different things at the same time. Like maybe we're learning both about investment and financial stuff, as well as trying to consume and understand the technology and this type of thing. So my advice to people is once you've found the real deal and you define the real deal as something where you're looking for emergent economies, where you're not going to get your time rugged. So you want something where there's enough complexity and gravity that if you spend time there, you'll figure something out. Ideally, you want it to be kind of early, but don't forget the game that you're playing. Like the game is you're trying to find these things. And when you find them, then you're meant to be drilling down. Because when you drill down, when you apply your own time, attention, whatever skills you have, that's what generates value. Like consider it like you have come across an oil field and you've got this kind of opportunity to set up camp there. But people sometimes forget the game that we're playing and they get stuck in, I am in airdrop hunt mode. What is the minimum number of things I must do to get airdrop? Okay, what's the next one? Do you not like, and that's a diminishing game.
It is,
So
and
yeah, I'd say,
it
yeah,
is, and I have
financial advice from Jani after dark. There you go.
yeah, no, and I have a confession to make here as well. I like a lot of things what you just said here because our brain, or I mean, we've been through so many methods, and especially also the airdrop method that you mentioned, where you just have to do like shallow stuff to get your rewards or whatnot, and your brain gets used to that as well. When I was introduced to BeraChain, it's exactly like you said. There is so much stuff to do. There are so many projects to look at. The ecosystem is so bright that I personally, it's a confession here, I gave up. I did the bare minimum that I had to do because that is what I was used to. And as I was like introduced to this whole variety of things, I was a little bit also almost overwhelmed. So I was just like, again, buying the honeycomb, just like doing the bare minimum. And now I start to go back into it as we approach mainnet launch. But I think this is actually, when you look at it now, because I've tested many chains before where, as you said, after 48 hours, there's not much you can do. You've seen it all, you've tried it all, and it's basically done. On to the next one, on to the next shallow to-dos that you can do to airdrop farm. And it is very different here. So yeah, it's an interesting take. And what I wanted to also touch on as well now, to talk a little bit about HoneyJar as well, and how everything started, and now maybe also interesting for other builders. As a founder of HoneyJar, you're playing a crucial role in incubating new projects. What does incubating mean exactly? Because me personally, I'm a part of Blever. We have a launchpad that we recently launched on ApeChain, and after like 2 weeks, we have over 40K unique wallets, over 150K NFTs sold, and approximately like 400K in volume. And just on ApeChain, and our next goal is to go multi-chain, and we are eyeing two chains at the moment. BeraChain is one of those, and maybe Abstract as well. And now the question is, as a builder, maybe is HoneyJar the right destination for us to talk to get incubated? Mostly like help with tech, for example, or is the foundation the right spot? If you're a builder, where should you knock? And who to talk to if you want to start building?
So for those, hello, I'm Jani. I built the HoneyJar. What that really means, so the HoneyJar is now a venture studio in the BeraChain ecosystem. We've got a portfolio of about 20 projects by this point. The flagship product, which we launched before we were a venture studio, was the Honeycomb. Which is it Michael or Mikhail?
Michael.
Michael, which Michael has. So the Honeycomb, to be honest, just started as a way for Jani to sell a bong bear for like more than $1 million. That was the main aim. And then the emergent property of working with teams in the Bera Eco, I suddenly realized that there was a much more valuable property of the ecosystem, and that was that there was a lot of teams who wanted to work together. And anytime that happens in an ecosystem, that's like a multi-million-dollar opportunity. And so Honeycomb is an NFT. There are 16,420 of them. It launched in the depths of the bear market during ETH Denver 2023 over the Silicon Valley bank run. It minted out in 2 weeks. We launched without any allocation for the team. There was no VCs, there was no insiders. We gave 40% of the supply to other communities already in the Bera Eco. And it's now the most widely traded and most widely distributed NFT, not just in the BeraChain ecosystem, but in NFTs on any chain for a collection of comparable size. Yeah, so it's up near, I think, considering the price, it's got, I think, maybe I forget, four to five times the number of trades compared to the bong bears and rebases, and it's got about 5,600 holders, which is more than, say, Pudgy Penguins or Milady, to kind of situate it. And part of the reason that it's held so widely is because of the anti-hustle tech feature. I'll go into this, and also the airdrop or perks aggregator. And so how it functions is essentially Jani, having been around so many different ecosystems that have launched, I've noticed that every project, once it's launching, wants to find users. So every project has this problem of how do we identify people who are going to use our stuff and be sticky users. And on the community side, kind of last cycle, it was particularly bad. The amount of time that was wasted by projects launching and then having all of these kind of crazy onboarding processes for people that consumed a lot of time for people to get stuff like whitelist, to get this type of thing. And it was, at the time, part of the understanding of how you build the cult, inverted commas. But Jani looked at it as just like wasted human time. And
Mm-hmm.
so I set out to kind of fix both of those two problems by essentially saying, okay, if every project integrates this asset, then they will, if they provide some type of benefit to the holders, then out of the bat, they'll get those holders on board. And it's played out that way. So we've
Mm-hmm.
already, if you held a honeycomb and you, let's say, sold all of the airdrops that it's received, the honeycomb has already paid for itself. So
Yeah, I
it's
know.
received airdrops from Layer Zero, Plug, from Unicorn and Memes, from Dyad, Kerosene, Sweeper, and there might be more there that I'm forgetting.
Mm-hmm.
And there's about 50 perks already announced once BeraChain launches. You can check all of this out on moneycomb.xyz, or
Mm-hmm.
you can go to any of the THJ websites and check the menu bar, and you'll be able to navigate your way there. So I give that as like a long preamble because essentially everything that we have done has always come at it from trying to solve problems that we understand are perennial in every ecosystem. And then as the test nets have come up, as BeraChain gets closer to launching, we've noticed very specific opportunities and problem sets that both users and projects have, and then built products to serve those things. Um, and so as an ecosystem now, we've kind of shifted from something that just mints NFTs. I think by this point, we've sold probably 250,000 NFTs between 2023 and now. Some of them a single dollar, some of them cost more than that. And this isn't counting the test nets. But we've moved from this kind of feast or famine, let's say, creative organization through to building. We've got products across meme coins, this class of product I'm calling MemeFi, which is like DeFi, but that serves meme coins. So we've got
Mm-hmm.
Henlo, which is a meme coin coming down. We've got NFTs, NFTFi, and this type of thing. In terms of incubation, I'd say 90% of the products in our portfolio are we created in-house to
Mm-hmm.
serve gaps in the market that we saw. And the two products, and we've got a third, which is not announced yet, but will be coming out, which are by teams outside of THJ, is the Bearer Baddies and Bullers.
Mm-hmm.
And really, what that looks like is it really depends on what the project particularly needs, whether it's finance, admin, and structuring ops, whether it's tech. So um, our tech capacity inside THJ is pretty phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
We've built a lot of shit over the last year and a half. But then in a lot of instances, to be honest, what projects need more is strategy. Because to be honest, when you're building in the Bera eco is really a different, running by a different set of rules, to be honest, than most ecosystems.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why people have left other ecosystems, and when they arrive at BeraChain, they then don't go anywhere else. And that's because the degree, I'd say it's the way I describe it is competitive cooperation. So there's still a lot of competition that you want to build the best thing that you can, and you want to let's say dominate's the wrong word. You want to excel to the full extent that you can, but
Mm-hmm.
it's an ecosystem where there's a general consensus of win and help win. And so a lot of the time it's about how can we integrate? What could we do together that grows the pie bigger so that we're not competing for the same exact slice?
Mm-hmm.
And so really, if you want to build, I would say reach out to any team that is kind of adjacent to the type of thing that you're doing. Even if
Mm-hmm.
they're a direct competitor, oftentimes if you reach out, they'll speak with you.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be where I would start. There isn't so much of a culture of like coming in and you'd be surprised to hear this, but actually one of the things that the foundation has done really right is it's got quite a light touch. Like it hasn't interfered too much with the emergent culture that's emerged from and around people interested in the proof of liquidity system. And I'd say whilst there is the Builder-Bearer incubator, which is adjacent to the foundation, the throughput of the incubator isn't super massive. I think by this point, maybe there's been 8 projects which have been announced through that system. And if you compare that to, say, the 200 projects that are ready to launch on Bera, it's kind of a smaller minority. I'd say in terms of other advice is really, if you're going to build somewhere, a fundamental question that you need to ask yourself is how do you increase the odds that there'll be product market fit? How do you increase the odds of the time that you input yielding results? And therefore you need different sets of liquidity. You're going to need, presumably, if it's anything touching tokens or finance flows, you need LPs, you need user liquidity, and you need attention liquidity. And there's a reason why projects outside of Bera are launching their first products serving the Bera community. Kaito is an example of this. That people know now that if they launch stuff into the BeraChain ecosystem and it's usable for those constituents, because BeraChain homes DeFi degens, NFT connoisseurs, artists, deep finance geeks, at the full kind of spectrum of crypto ecosystem participant exists in Bera. And so in terms of de-risking, it's one of the zones that you can build for that is heavily de-risked in looking at it from that perspective. And I think that the evidence for that is in the number of projects which have come to Bera and stuck around, despite the fact the chain hasn't launched yet.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. The amount of projects, it's really insane. So Builder-Bearer is maybe and to speak directly to the competition. That's something I know that, and this is something that we will do for sure. So yeah, thank you.
And yeah, let Jenny know how it goes, because yeah, it's always interesting to hear, and stuff will, as ecosystems grow, as cultures adapt and this type of thing, maybe aspects of those types of dynamics will change. I certainly hope not, because I think it's I really think it's a brilliant aspect of the culture around Bera up until now. But you know, as things reach, let's say, different social states, as we move from gas to liquid to solid, back to liquid to get, like, as stuff reaches escape velocity for whatever phase it's in, it's inevitable that aspects, attributes change. But I really hope that that spirit persists. But you know, you can't control these things. But I think it's notable that it's been there since the day Jani arrived to the eco. November, you can see when Jani arrived to BeraChain by looking at the start date of the Jani Twitter account. That was the day I merged into the Bera eco. And it's been that way all the way up until now, like the entire time I've been around. So yeah, let me know how your experience as a builder is. We'd love to see you, and if it's a fit, that's great, because yeah, the more things there are to do, I think when you have a community or a culture or a set of people who are in that mind frame instead of the shallow farming or hunting mind frame, really that's where the juice and the magic comes from. When you've got hundreds and thousands of people who spend their time deeply, they're not hopping around, they're like spending actual time there. That's where the real magic comes from, in terms of I wouldn't, yeah, on magic on the internet, when you've got people spending their time, skill, money, attention for hours every day, it starts looking like these thriving economies where actually this is people's real job, not the whatever they're doing. I call it the McDonald's, that it's your hobby. McDonald's becomes your hobby. And if you're an academic or you work in a bank, I'm calling it all McDonald's. It's the meat space job during this market cycle becomes the hobby. And you want to find zones where you can actually dedicate your proper energies and time. Because I think it's fair to say, without jumping into financial advice, we're all here to escape the rat race or to kind of earn more potentially than we can at McDonald's. Whatever our version of McDonald's is, whether you're an academic, whether you're a software engineer at a company, whether you're a service worker, a mechanic, or whatever. And I think, yeah, you want to make sure that wherever you are spending your time isn't going to rug you time-wise or this type of thing.
So the number one advice for new people coming in would be, from Jani himself, would be spend $1, spend 48 hours deeply into the ecosystem, and that's how you get started, basically, right?
I think I'm impressed by myself. It's very concise. Normally my answers are too long, but yes, spend each thing which jumps out at you. Let's say Sui, BeraChain, Solana. Spend $1 somewhere in that ecosystem. Then spend 48 hours. I would say there's another caveat here, and that is because those things will open up your curiosity. So one of the things you're trying to break with that $1 is your resistance, your hesitation, your caution, because you need to overcome those things at this moment in time. Despite this being a money thing that's scary, technology thing, it's scary. But then also in terms, the third thing I think, which is really unique to each person, and I think it will take you on your own journey, is find what resonates with you. What's the thing that makes you, what's the meme that makes you laugh? Which chain and ecosystem did that come from? And maybe have that guide you as well. I would say that one of the good things about entering into a broad culture is it's commonplace investment advice. Like typically time in the market is better than timing the market. And that's why for most people, kind of investing in index funds is probably the way to go, and leaving it for a longer amount of time. And if you kind of dissect how those index portfolios generally work, is typically like a very large percentage of the stocks in a portfolio, they're going to underperform or do badly or lose money or fold. And it's the very few things which actually outperform and kind of lift up the performance of the entire thing. And so I would say that when you are following your interest, do differentiate between, for example, let's say you land in a single one of Murad's cult coins, right? That's a single coin that you're kind of binding your potential outcome to. Whereas if you also, let's say, put $1 into a culture that is an entire ecosystem, you essentially have more shots on net. Like you're not kind of placing it all in one singular cult, if we're going to use that terminology. And I think that's, again, one of the benefits of looking into not just one particular project, but new ecosystems or existing ecosystems. Because, yeah, more shots on net is good.
So again, when it comes to newbies now, because testing now, beta testing probably doesn't make any sense anymore, or not a lot. So when starting new, because you said that touching a culture is maybe better than just one specific project. Like Honeycomb would, for example, help in that regards as well, right? Because it's tied to so many incentives from different projects as well. So, or how would you advise a super newbie just to when that person wants to join the chain, what are like the first steps if like the beta testing is like over, what to do now when they just first enter?
Like this question that you are asking is the question that I asked myself this back in 2022. And I was like, BeraChain, if it works, is going to have hundreds of projects, and a new person arriving is going to ask themselves, where the hell do I start?
Yeah.
And I wanted to be able to answer that with a single word. And the answer to your question is honeycomb.
Yeah.
Why? Honeycomb is a perks aggregator. It's integrated into most of the projects that are launching on BeraChain, and it will probably continue to be integrated into more or less every project that launches on BeraChain, because by this point, it's let me give you some data. So Jumper Finance, which is a major cross-chain exchange, did an analysis of holders of Honeycomb, and they found that more than half of Honeycomb holders were, I think they said, level 7 users of Jumper Chain, and about 25%. I put a tweet out of this, so the exact numbers may be slightly incorrect. But in the general gist of what I'm saying is there's a recognition by projects now that when they integrate Honeycomb, they get a lot of usage. And so it's reached this kind of reflexivity where now the cost to a project to not integrate Honeycomb is too high. And so if you do one thing and you can afford it, Honeycomb is a really good entry point to the BeraChain ecosystem. And then the second thing that you should do is look at the ecosystem explorer of the HoneyJar or BeraLand. BeraLand is more agnostic, like it's more neutral. The THJ ecosystem mapper is much more opinionated about the direct partners of THJ. And then really, I would actually say if the testnet is still going, do use the testnet because it builds it's like training. There are so many things to do in the BeraChain ecosystem that before the mainnet comes, you have this opportunity to kind of train. I'm happy to send folks testnet Bera if you need it, or you can go to the THJ faucet or any of the faucets. That would be Jani's advice. Use the testnet. Like if you've never used one before, the BeraChain one is going to spoil you because normally testnets are quite painful.
Yeah, I used it myself. It was actually pretty straightforward and easy.
Yeah, yeah. And so those are the bits of advice I would say. The BeraChain Foundation put out a fantastic blog. Check out the videos and small interviews that they do. You can listen to the Honeycast. It has some great interviews with builders from the chain. But if you do one thing only, getting Honeycomb is a really good entry point.
Well, guys, you heard it here first. The chain has a bear on it. Thank you so much for your time, Jani, and we'll speak soon.
Booga booga, and yeah, thanks.
Boga boga. Bye bye.